Our guest speaker is Mr. Bill. I'm sorry, Mr. William for Bill, I understand.
Bill, please call me.
Bill Redpath, who again is running for the 10th Congressional District. And I'm not going to give all his bio because he can probably do much more better than I can. But to point out a few things about Mr. Redpath here. He is a libertarian from the Libertarian Party, and he has been, according to this, I'm pulling off your site here.
Right
Since 1984, been a Libertarian candidate. He's also been he's the current chairman of the Virginia Libertarian Party and also at-large representative of the Libertarian National Committee. Hi, come on in, thanks. Also, he serves as the treasurer of Fair Vote, an electoral reform organization, and as a treasurer of the Citizens in Charge and the Citizens in Charge Foundation, which promotes and educates the public about initiatives and referenda. And he's run for office 5 different times. And Virginia House of Delegates, Virginia Senate, he's run for governor, the U.S. Senate, and the U.S. House. With that, any other question on his bio, I will let him give you that. With no further ado, okay. Mr. Redpath, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I'll stand up because I have some notes that I will consult from time to time. And that would be a good thing for me to do periodically. But thank you very much for having me this evening. I will speak for a while and then we'll open it up to Q&A. But again, it's an honor and privilege to be here. Thanks for having me. What is the Libertarian Party, first of all? Well, the Libertarian Party promotes libertarianism, which is a philosophy, and it summed up rather well, I think, in the title of a book that recently was published, written by Matt Kibbe, where he said basically, don't hurt other people and don't take their stuff. And that pretty much sums it up, frankly, in just a very few words. The Libertarian Party was actually founded in 1971, and I facetiously, a little bit, say that it was founded by Richard Nixon, which is mainly not true, but he stimulated the development, or the founding, I should say, of the Libertarian Party, because in 1971, August 15, 1971, it would have been the summer before I entered 9th grade, and I remember the night where he went on TV, and I really didn't appreciate, as a 13-year-old at the time, the gravity of the wage and price controls that he instituted at that time, and also the closing of the gold window, which basically completely disconnected the dollar from gold and made the dollar a total fiat currency. And there were people who then said, who I guess had previously been a part of the Republican Party, who said we can't go on with that party and that person anymore. Not after he just abrogated our economic freedoms in the way that he did. We've got to go and form a new political party. And a new political party was formed in 1971. We ran a presidential ticket in 1972. It was on the ballot in 2 states. But there actually was a little bit of history associated with the 1972 Libertarian Party presidential ticket. A man by the name of John Hospers, who was a philosophy professor, and Tony Nathan. However, Tony was a woman. And Tony Nathan, her real name was Theodora, became the first woman to ever receive an electoral vote in the history of the United States, because there was a faithless elector from Virginia named Roger McBride, who later became, 4 years later, became the presidential nominee of the Libertarian Party in 1976. But he did not cast a vote for Richard Nixon. He cast a vote for Hospers and Tony Nathan. Ms. Nathan just died 2 or 3 months ago, I want to say. She was in her early 90s, I believe, and just passed away earlier this year for sure. But she was actually, it was not Geraldine Ferraro, it was Tony Nathan who received the first electoral vote in U.S. history. The Libertarian Party is the top 3rd party in the United States. And I say that, it's more than me wanting that to be the case. I think any objective look at the evidence, including the number of candidates that we have, the ballot access in various states, the votes we receive, the number of candidates we run. The Libertarian Party is well ahead of the Green Party and the Constitution Party, which are really the other 2 major minor political parties in the United States. In 6 of the last 7 U.S. House elections, the Libertarian Party ran candidates for U.S. House and received over 1 million votes nationwide for U.S. House of Representatives, 6 of the last 7 U.S. House elections. The last time that previously happened for any political party in the United States was in 1912. Now, I will grant you that in 1912, that's a much better achievement then than it is today, getting 1 million votes for U.S. House. But we've done it 6 of the last 7 elections. And what was really amazing to us anyway in 2012 was that they had instituted top 2 voting in California, which means everybody runs in an open primary that is not the general election. The top 2, I believe if nobody gets a majority, although it might be the top 2 regardless. But anyway, only the top 2 then advance to the general election ballot, which in some instances means 2 Democrats are running against each other or 2 Republicans are running against each other, but no Libertarian candidates made the top 2 for U.S. House in 2012 in California. We thought, well, that's it. That's the end of 1 million votes for U.S. House. No, even with 0 votes in California in 2012, we still had over 1 million votes nationwide for U.S. House. A little bit about me. I am, a 30, just past 30, and 1/3 year member of the Libertarian Party. I'm 56 years of age. I have lived in Virginia since 1985. I do business valuation work in media and telecommunications in Chantilly with a firm by the name of BIA Kelsey. I have been there since I became a Virginian in 1985. I just had my 29th anniversary there. I am a certified public accountant, a licensed CPA in Virginia. I'm also a chartered financial analyst. I have 2 business valuation designations from the AICPA and the American Society of Appraisers. And as I said, I've been very involved in the Libertarian Party, as Mr. Phillips said, very involved in the Libertarian Party in Virginia. And I'm the former national chairman of the Libertarian Party, Libertarian National Committee, from 2006 to 2010. The question is posed to me, why are you running? And I say, only somewhat facetiously, because I couldn't get anybody else to do it. But that is, I mean, that is somewhat serious, but I really thought this race in particular, given Frank Wolf's retirement, and I ran against Mr. Wolf and a Democrat by the name of Jeff Barnett in 2010, but I really thought this race deserved a Libertarian voice in it. And also Rob Sarvis, who was our candidate for governor last year and stepped forward unbelievably, in my opinion, but he stepped forward then the immediate following year, this year, to run for U.S. Senate in 2014. It was his goal to get a full slate of U.S. House candidates in Virginia this year, in all 11 congressional districts. We didn't make it. It takes 1,000 valid signatures in each congressional district to get on the ballot. We didn't make it in districts 1, 2, 3, and 9, but we made it in all the other districts, and that is a record for the Libertarian Party of Virginia, to have 7 U.S. House candidates, and I made it. I got my 1,000 valid signatures here in the 10th district, and so I'm on. But substantively, I am running because of our continuing erosion in freedoms in this nation, particularly economic freedom. And economic freedom is so important. Economic freedom is the underpinning of all our freedoms. I mean, we really can't have political freedom, and we really won't have personal freedom if we can't have economic freedom. I remember, if you belong to Amazon Prime, I just discovered this. I subscribe to Amazon Prime, and there is a fantastic Ken Burns, probably a lot of Ken Burns, is that his? Yes, Ken Burns documentaries. And there is one on there that was produced back in the 1980s about Huey Long. And it is a fascinating documentary. And I urge you to seek this documentary out if you want a really fascinating 90 minutes. But there's one woman who's interviewed, and basically she said that nobody could really challenge Huey Long in Louisiana, given the economic conditions of the time, because you basically worked for the government, or the power company had a few jobs. This is in the early part of the Depression, and there really weren't many jobs down there, and so people basically felt beholden and couldn't challenge Huey Long because of their economic time. One man said that one man served in the legislature way back then, and he was being interviewed, and he said Huey Long walked up and said, "I want you to vote for such and such," and he says, no viewing, I can't do it. I think it's bad governance. I'm not going to vote for that. The next day he came home, his father had been fired. His father had been fired from his job the next day because he said no to Huey Long. And that I think crystallizes the fact that economic freedom is an underpinning of all of our freedoms. And the United States is falling in economic freedom. There are two big indices. One of them is called Economic Freedom of the World. 2 studies that come out annually. I think that comes out from the Heritage Foundation. And then there is Economic Freedom of the World. It comes out from the Cato Institute and the Fraser Institute from Canada. And Index of Economic Freedom, that's it. I think Index of Economic Freedom is what comes out from Heritage. But in any event, Economic Freedom of the World, in 2000, the United States ranked number 2. In there, of course, there are subjective judgments here, but the U.S. ranked number 2 in economic freedom in that study in the year 2000. In the last study that came out, which I believe was in late 2013, the U.S. had fallen to number 17 in economic freedom in the world, behind Canada, behind nations that you wouldn't think the United States would rank behind in economic freedom. And this has happened under both a Republican president and a Democratic president. It has happened under both Republican controlled Congress and a Democratic controlled Congress. And the situation just keeps getting worse. And we're not moving up, we're moving down in terms of economic freedom. And it wouldn't surprise me that before long we'll drop out of the top 20, because I just don't think, I've witnessed too much of the time, the concept of economic freedom is just not respected by so many people in our society. I think that somehow, I hear this all the time, that the system is stacked against us. It's stacked against and people who feel that the answer is to our problems is more government spending and more taxes, and the focus on income inequality these days. I think that is particularly bad these days for economic freedom. You choose freedom or choose equality, but you can't really have both. And certainly in the economic realm, that is the case. I do think the government should treat people equally, but in terms of our economy, we're not going to have economic freedom and economic equality. I think they are mutually exclusive. So that is really I'd say the main reason substantively as to why I'm running. Now, what would I do about it if I were elected? Well, first of all, I'd reduce federal spending. And I don't mean reduce the growth rate of federal spending. I mean reduce federal spending. There is a great website from the Cato Institute, and I think a lot of the Cato Institute. I think they do a great job in terms of research. There is a Cato Institute website called downsizinggovernment.org. And I agree with the proposed cuts in government spending that are on that website. It lists over $780 billion in annual savings in various discretionary spending that the Cato Institute thinks could be cut from the federal budget. In particular, it calls for, and I call for, elimination of the Department of Education, elimination of the Department of Energy, and elimination of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And there are major expenditure reductions in other departments. I also think all corporate welfare and all farm subsidies should be ceased immediately. I think that including shutdown of the Export-Import Bank. I don't understand why politicians, yeah, it accomplishes some good, but so many politicians don't see the unseen. In the economic realm, there is the seen and the unseen. What could be if this weren't occurring? Well, I think that a lot of people just don't see that, including a lot of our elected politicians. And I don't think that the Export-Import Bank should be allowed to favor certain industries and certain businesses over others in this nation. And I think it hurts economic freedom. I think it hurts our prosperity. I think there ought to be fundamental tax reform. I personally endorse the Hall-Rabushka flat tax. I think that it would reduce federal tax rates. It would greatly simplify our tax code, and it would foster greater entrepreneurship in this nation, which we badly need. It calls for a 19% tax rate on an individual income tax rate of 19%, also a business tax rate of 19%. but it would end the double taxation of dividends and capital gains, which I think would be an excellent thing for our economy. With respect to healthcare, I do think there ought to be one exception to a flat tax, and that is a credit, that is a refundable tax credit to people to be able to buy health insurance in this nation. John Goodman of the National Center for Policy Analysis calls for a $2,500 tax credit, refundable tax credit for every adult, $8,000 for a family of 4, to allow them, and by the way, this would only be available if they went out and purchased health insurance with it. I think we have several problems with health insurance in this nation. First of all, too many people, it's not really insurance. There are so many people out there who think that all of their medical expenses should be paid for from first dollar. I think that it ought to be true health insurance. And we don't get our auto insurance. Some of us get life insurance. We don't get, and some of us get disability insurance, certain other insurances through our employer, but we certainly don't get auto insurance through our employer. There is no need for us to get health insurance through our employer. That is a relic of World War II, when there were wage controls and employers had to compete through fringe benefits to get more employees. They couldn't pay them higher wages. Well, we'll give you health benefits. We'll give you some health insurance. And also the distortion in the tax code where employers get to deduct it, the self-employed get to a certain extent. I believe it's half, as I recall. And then people who aren't self-employed just have to pay out of their own pocket. There's not a deduction. So there's an unlevel playing field with respect to health insurance in this nation. But I think we need to move away. It's important to deregulate also, for there to be, health insurance ought to be purchased across state lines or be legally purchasable across state lines. I just read something recently about Texas and how there are some areas of Texas where they barely have, now this is a state issue, I recognize, but where because Texas allows less freedom for people who are not licensed physicians, including LPNs, that out in some of the poorer areas of Texas, people don't have access to health care because of regulations that doctors have to be there to supervise, and the doctor population is so thin out in these areas that there would be better health care available if they allowed licensed LPNs and registered nurses to do more, but that's not allowed under the laws of Texas. There needs to be a greater deregulation of health. There needs to be, we need to adopt we need to free up the system to allow suppliers of healthcare to react to the needs of their patients, of their clients, including email consultation or telephone consultation. There's too much, you got to come into the office, we got to see you, ... I think that there needs to be just a general greater deregulation of health care in this nation, and that will certainly help reduce the cost to consumers for health care. The plan to replace Obamacare, and if I didn't mention it, I will now. I want to replace Obamacare with a more consumer-friendly regime of health care in this nation. It should have choice for consumers, it should have fairness, it should have universality, it should have portability, transparency, and be real insurance. And that's where we need to go here in terms of reform of health care in this nation. Social Security, and let me just digress for a moment here. We need to address it's referred to as the entitlement crisis. We need to address these issues as soon as possible, because the American government, the U.S. government, is going to welch on its promises to the American people. I guarantee it. It is absolutely going to happen. There is no way it can't happen right now. With the demographics of this nation, the federal budget deficit being what it is, while the economy's good, and right now I think the economy is pretty good right now. Geez, we're now to the point where now we're running a $500 billion a year budget deficit when the economy's good. And when it wasn't good for 4 consecutive years during the first term of Barack Obama, it was over $1 trillion. And right now, yes, it's going to hold steady, the deficit going forward. The Congressional Budget Office sees it rising again starting in 2018 and not coming back down. At some point, that's going to spell real trouble for this nation. When holders of the debt of the United States government begin to think that this nation is going to be unable or unwilling to repay its debt and pay interest on the debt going forward. And we've got to address the entitlement issues. Social Security. I support the Cato Institute's 6.2% plan is what it's called. I think people over the age of, say, 55 should be protected in the current Social Security system, but under the 6.2% plan, younger people would be able to divert not pay into Social Security with their employee portion, their 6.2% that comes out of their paycheck. The 6.2 employer portion would continue to go into Social Security and fund payments for the current senior citizens and soon to be senior citizens, of which I am unfortunately one. But in any case, one thing that proponents of Social Security don't tell you or don't say is that you have no property rights in Social Security. That was established in the Nestor v. Fleming lawsuit, where somebody, I believe he was a communist, I forget all the details, but anyway, somebody ruled, or he didn't get Social Security, he was ruled ineligible for Social Security, and the Supreme Court basically said, yeah, you don't have rights in your Social Security benefits. If you had private investment accounts, people would have property rights and be more secure in their private investment accounts. They don't have to invest in the stock market. That canard is wheeled out. Oh, we don't want to risk it in the stock market. Well, the stock market has the best gains over the long run historically, but if people don't want to invest in the stock market with their private accounts, they don't have to. If Chile has had a very successful program instituted years ago for privatized Social Security accounts. If Chile can have it, the land of the free should be able to have them as well. And so that's the plan I support for Social Security. With Medicare, I think we need to go, instead of a defined benefit program, we need to go to a defined contribution program. Basically premium support for Medicare recipients. This program has to be reformed. This is the toughest one right now. I mean, other than Social Security disability, which is going to run, I believe that's going to be exhausted about 2 years from now. Medicare is in worse shape in terms of the accounting trust fund, quote unquote. Medicare is in worse shape than Social Security. First of all, the one thing that I do not understand, if a person wants to opt out of Medicare, they would lose their Social Security benefits as well. I mean, that is, and that's not even a law. My understanding is it was an administrative ruling that has been upheld in the courts. But if somebody wants out of Medicare, why do they have to sacrifice their Social Security benefits? Well, somehow this has been constructed to keep them in the Medicare program. That has to change. I don't understand that at all. It strikes me as crazy. But I think that should change. But I think that we should move to a competitive system of insurance. There should be premium support, helping seniors pay their premiums, and then have a more competitive private health insurance program that they would take advantage of, and to get to people are more careful with their own money than other people's money. So I think that having a system whereby we incentivize seniors to shop for the most cost-efficient medical plans and insurance is the right way to go, and would be a great cost savings to the federal government. We need to move away from a pay-as-you-go system. We need to have a system where, as I said, with Social Security, private investment accounts, that people can really count on, not be at the mercy of Congress when they decide that, well, we've got to cut Social Security benefits by 23%, and that trust fund runs dry, I believe in 2033 now, or any other time Congress decides they want to do that, even though there's no they show no inclination to do that right now. But if it ever comes to an economic crisis, they might have to. If the dollar is in trouble, if interest rates soar, if there are economic problems, that might happen. With respect to Medicaid, I think that there ought to be a block grant, and instead of a system where the federal government pays more and more and more all the time, and the state spends more and the federal government spends more, Medicaid ought to be block granted right now to to a state, here's your money, and phase that out over 10 years. Phase the program out over 10 years. The states can address the problems that Medicaid is meant to address. And they don't have Superman or Superwoman pills for federal employees. Somehow they can function better than employees at state and local governments or with private charity. I think that having a system whereby mankind advances through trial and error, and I think we ought to give states the chance to experiment and see what works best in terms of providing health care to the poor. And I think it's something that there's no need to send money to Washington, have them take their cut for administrative costs, and then send money to the states. And the spending in this also, the spending is out of control in Medicare, and it's one of the things that's driving the federal deficit, and that's the way I think it ought to be addressed by phasing out federal involvement in Medicaid and having that become a state responsibility. With respect to national defense, I think that the United States, we have to have a strong defense for the United States and the people in it, but we are spending way too much money. Again, given our fiscal situation, we are spending way more as a percentage of GDP in absolute dollars on our national defense than our wealthy allies. And we need to get our allies who can afford to pay more for their own defense to do so, particularly in Europe, as well as in Asia, including Japan, spending 1.5%, I believe, on GDP. South Korea has many advantages over North Korea in terms of population and wealth. It should be able to defend itself. There's a book out called Restraint, A New Foundation for U.S. Grand Strategy, written by Barry Posen. He thinks that an expenditure of 2.5% U.S. gross domestic product would be enough to ably defend the United States. He's an expert on this. Given how much we spend, given how much our allies should spend on their own defense, I think that we can spend basically right now with a gross domestic product of about $16.8 billion a year. 2.5% would be about $400 billion a year for the Defense Department, and I think that is a goal that we should strive for. Certainly in no way to reduce the defense capabilities for the United States and the people and the property in it, but I do think that our allies are more than happy to look to us in various parts of the world, and we need to have them stand on their own more. Also, it is long past time for the war power to return to Congress. If we are attacked, that's one thing, all right? And it may be advisable to go after ISIS, it may not. It may be advisable to get involved in Libya, it may not. I personally think not on those issues, but I'll tell you what, unless we've been attacked or we are responding to a likely attack from an enemy in the near future, it should not be up to one man to decide what the U.S. military is going to do. The Constitution calls for Congress to vote on these issues, and I don't know why we have evolved in this nation to the point where the president can pretty much get a blank check to do more or less, not all the time, not completely, but more or less what he wants to do. If it's not an emergency, the Congress should vote to approve any military engagement in this nation. I am a free trader. I I think we ought to be involved not only in various trade agreements around the world that open up markets, but frankly, I think the United States should set an example for the world and unilaterally drop trade barriers. Should unilaterally drop trade barriers to goods being imported into the United States. That is a pro-consumer policy, and that is the only thing we all are in this nation. We are all consumers. After that, we have different jobs, we have different professions, we have different interests, things of that nature, but a free trade policy would not only benefit the consumers of this nation, like I said, we all are, but it would also indicate to the nation that we want peace. Free trade is very important to international peace. And I think the best way for us to demonstrate that would be to end trade barriers wherever the United States can, regardless of what other nations do. I don't think it's a case of us versus them. It's a case of economic freedom for the people of the United States, buying products from other nations, and hopefully they will buy products from the United States as well. And I think the best thing to do is set an example there. And hopefully other nations will follow, and I think a lot of nations will. On immigration, I am also a free trader on immigration. I am for open but regulated immigration into the United States. If someone does not have a criminal background, if someone does not have a serious communicable disease, and cannot reasonably be deemed a security threat, they should be able to immigrate to the United States, again, through a regulated and controlled process. We're not talking about come over the border anytime you want or anything like that. But we're talking about a system that allows people to come here, get a work visa. That's the important thing, is to allow people to come here. I certainly don't think they ought to have, well, first of all, I don't think the federal government ought to be involved in welfare, and it should be up to the states to do what they want to do. But I would advise states not to allow immigrants into a welfare system. But I think if they want to come here and work, that's fine. I also think, I just heard something recently in Canada. The Reason Foundation is a libertarian think tank. And in Canada, they have an immigration system where it is the provinces actually that decide how many people they want to come to Canada. And different provinces want different types of people. But and I thought, at first I thought, well, that's kind of crazy. But then I actually heard a presentation made online by somebody from the Reason Foundation regarding the federalization of immigration in Canada. And it actually sounded a lot better as an idea after I heard it. And it's something to consider here, to perhaps allow the states to say, okay, we'll take a number of people and decide what immigration policies should be for people who want to settle in their state. As far as government surveillance goes, the surveillance capabilities of the federal government show how important it is that we live in a libertarian society. We've had over-criminalization of criminal law in the United States, and I think that is a very bad combination with a government that has such great surveillance skills. We need to repeal a lot of laws, in my opinion, and if the government has information on you with fewer criminal laws, that is at least a start to relieve the government of power to come after you based on information that they have. But I certainly think that any government surveillance program needs to have transparency, it needs to have legal authority. They need to target real threats to society. It's like the needle in the haystack. You know, they are taking so much data these days where I think that it's just too, how can they process it all? They need to think harder about what they are going to target in these mass fragments of cell phone calls, and it seems to me that it is not as smart as thinking about potential targets, potential enemies in the first place, so it really needs to be targeted, and its effectiveness needs to be tracked. And but certainly the Fourth Amendment needs to be taken seriously, and people have a right to go about their lives without the government spying on them, and they need to be secure in their property, and our civil liberties need to be taken seriously. And the government, the many people in government may be very well-meaning, but you can look back over the years, IRS abuses going back to at least to Richard Nixon, if not before. If the government knows something and they are able to use it against you, many times they will. And that's why I think that we need to take a look at the over-criminalization of our law, see what we can do about that. Part of that has to do with victimless crime or consensual crime. I call for all federal laws regarding consensual crimes to be repealed. I think that we ought to end, as with the end of alcohol prohibition, federal government should end the federal war on drugs. I think that the states ought to address those issues and institute what regimes they like in terms of regulation of alcohol and drugs, but I don't think it ought to be something the federal government should be involved in. Now, I would say that I would be in favor of a ban, a legal ban, on a drug that by its pharmacological nature, so if someone ingested it, they would grab a chainsaw and chop up half the people in their neighborhood. Right? That drug ought to be banned. But that is not the case with the vast majority of illegal drugs in this nation. I'm certainly not saying they are helpful. I think they ought to be taxed to pay for any negative externalities that are caused by people using them, but I do not think it is right. I do not think it is right that the government instigates violence in the drug war, which it does. It is tearing apart Mexico. The drug prohibition is causing huge negative ramifications in Mexico and other nations, including our own, certain neighborhoods certainly, in our society, and I think the federal government ought to stop prosecuting the war on drugs. I also think that it should repeal its prohibition of online gambling and allow Americans the freedom to gamble when they wish. I know there are going to be some problems involved there. Some people do become addicted to gambling. I recognize that. There have to be other ways to address this, but I do not think that people should be denied the freedom to do things, frankly, that are disreputable. I think that is a part of freedom, is to tolerate people doing things that don't harm you. And I think that when I ran for governor in 2001, the slogan of my campaign was anything that's peaceful. It's actually a book about libertarianism, written by a man by the name of Leonard Reed back in the 1960s. It is not a pacifist statement. It basically means that anything that's legal should be peaceful. Anything that's peaceful should be legal. And so that is, I think that's the yardstick to use, whether something should be criminalized or not. Also, speaking to the election system, I don't know if any of you saw my op-ed that ran, I think it was August 11 in the Winchester Star, regarding instant runoff voting. I am not running to be a spoiler in this campaign, to deny Barbara Comstock or John Faust, or even the two other candidates. There's an independent Green named Diane Blay, and an independent candidate by the name of Brad Eichel. And they both got their 1,000 signatures. I actually signed Diane Blay's petition outside a supermarket, and I went home and Googled her and saw she was an independent Green, and I know they're good at petitioning. That is one thing I've got to hand it to the Independent Green Party of Virginia, which is basically a single state political party, is my understanding. I don't think I'm misspeaking, but they're good at petitioning and getting on the ballot. And I thought, I bet Diane makes the ballot. She did. But in any event, I think that we ought to have instant runoff voting. I don't think that we have a system now where we have two major party candidates in too many elections who are trying to get elected by saying, I'm not the other guy, or I'm not that woman, just trying to be somebody. And too many people go into the voting booth voting against someone as opposed to for someone. That seems inherent in this single-member plurality voting. We have single-member legislatures, single-member district legislature. Like we have 100 single-member districts in the Virginia House of Delegates, 40 single-member districts for the Virginia Senate, 11 single-member districts for the U.S. House of Representatives. Just a question here, if anybody knows. November 2013, just last year, less than 1 year ago, 100 single-member district elections for the Virginia House of Delegates. Does anybody know how many of those elections had only one candidate on the ballot? Not one challenger, one candidate. 45. 45. If you don't believe me, go to the State Board of Elections website. I mean, 45. You think that's bad? In November 2011, it was 63. 63 out of 100, and the press doesn't report this. The press, to me, that's the big story of the election. 63 people of the 100 going into the House of Delegates for the next 2 years don't even have a challenger on the ballot, and it's only 125 valid signatures to get on the ballot for the Virginia House of Delegates. So there's that. But with instant runoff voting, may not understand how it works. You would rank your candidates. This is my first choice, this is my second choice, my third, as many or as few as you like. If somebody gets a majority of first choice votes, they win the election. If that does not occur, then you eliminate candidates from the bottom up. And you if the bottom candidate is eliminated, then everybody who cast their first choice vote for that candidate gets their vote transferred to their next choice candidate. And they continue this process until somebody has a majority of the non-exhausted votes. If you cast a vote, just gave first choice to somebody and no second choice, no third choice, your vote would be exhausted if your candidate is eliminated. But what this does is, it does away with the spoilers. The wasted vote syndrome, or the concept of spoilers, will be completely done away with instant runoff voting. And I think it's something that very much needs to be adopted. It's a complicated world. I mean, there are different positions that I've been through about a dozen different issues right here. But I think that instant runoff voting would introduce a lot more effective choice of the ballot box to voters. We're stuck with single-member plurality voting with the U.S. Congress because of a 1966, or maybe in 67, but 1960s law that mandates single-member districts for U.S. House elections. The United States had a long history of multi-member U.S. House districts before this law was passed about 48 years ago. And I think that it should be up to each state to decide if they want to have single-member districts or multi-member districts for election of people to the U.S. House of Representatives. And I also think, however, that to really give people effective choice for state legislatures, we ought to have some form of proportional representation in the United States. That is what would really allow more parties than just the R's and D's to develop and be effective competitors in the U.S. electoral process. So with that, I thank you very much for your indulgence and listening to me this evening, and I will certainly entertain questions.
Joe, I think you want to be the moderator?
Sure.
Well, you don't. Oh, no. All right, disregard that. You want to be the moderator?
We won't have him do that and moderate at the same time.
Okay.
Did we interesting?
Great stuff, Bill. Really enjoyed hearing what you had to say. A question I have, one subject you didn't touch on too much was education, and probably I'm thinking you probably think the federal government should be out of the education, but you talked about tax credits, and I am an ardent supporter of school choice, and I think the only way we can fix it is by giving parents tax credits here in Virginia.
I agree.
And I would just like to hear what you think about education and school choice and tax credits.
I agree. When I ran for state office, I called for a universal education tax credit. And there's a great paper. The Virginia Institute for Public Policy has published at least one paper and maybe more on universal tax credits. And I think while vouchers would be a step in the right direction, there are constitutionality problems that come up in the courts and that sort of thing. So I think tax credits would be better. But on the subject of education, there is no better topic when you're running for federal office, because I can give the easy answer is the right answer. Leave it to the states. And what's not to like as a candidate? Say, leave it to the states, not our business at the federal level, and when it's the right answer, it's great. So I agree with you on that. Not only that, I would even go further and say that I do not think that the state should be subsidizing higher education. But that's a state issue. That's a state issue. To me, it's a perverse form of wealth redistribution. And you've got people who are coming from more affluent, not bad. People will jump up, oh, you don't believe education is important? Of course education. It's vitally important in our society. But I just answered a questionnaire that brought up student debt. Well, what are you going to do about the student debt problem if you're on? And I said, nothing. I said, other than make sure the federal government does not harm freedom of education. I mean, I think we're about to have, other people I know who know more about the subject than I think we're going to have an online higher education revolution in this nation. And subsidization of student loans, cheap credit to students, is one of the things that has incentivized students to take on too much debt and has driven up college costs. The government has fueled college cost inflation by their policies. And I think that if there is something that could be done about it, I do think there's an underinvestment in human capital in this nation. But if you've never read Capitalism and Freedom by Milton Friedman, a 1962 book, excellent book, in that he talks about equity investment in human capital. And talks about, in fact, there was a website a few years ago, I don't think it's up anymore, it was called myrichuncle.com. But what he proposed was, again, it would be voluntary, there wouldn't be any indentured servitude involved, but voluntary agreements whereby somebody would say, who's older and relatively wealthy, I will pay for your college education, but in exchange, I will receive X% of your earnings coming out of college for X number of years, Y number of years. And that sounds a little different when we are so used to debt financing of education, but it makes some sense. And it would be a great way for people to invest in human capital, and it would also mean that students coming out of school would not have loans to repay. So as long as it's voluntary, more power to the people who want to participate in that, but I don't know where that's going on in the United States right now, or if it is. Yes, sir.
Two issues. One, I like your comments about the instant voting. This election's over, I hope it's through that. How do you differ in policy from either the Republican or Democratic opponent?
Well, first of all, I'm pretty specific about it.
I appreciate you laying out.
Right.
So
Well, I mean,
So,
to a certain extent, I don't know. I mean, I've been to Barbara Comstock's website, and well, first of all, let me deal with John Faust. I can't believe John Faust wants to reform Social Security or any of the entitlements. I'm not aware that he wants to do that. I presume that he more or less, I can't believe that he's, to the best of my knowledge, he supports Obamacare. I can't believe that he would differ much from the Democratic Party line
okay.
if he were elected. Okay. With respect to Barbara Comstock, I've been to her website, and gosh, if there are 100 words on her issues page, I mean, let me be a little more charitable. If there are 200 words on her issues page, I'd be surprised. She talks about tax relief. Well, okay, what tax relief? I don't see anywhere addressing the entitlements crisis that's forthcoming. I don't see anywhere where she wants to cut the size of cut federal spending. It's implied that she, on her website, that she wants to maintain or increase the level of defense spending of this nation. So without more specifics that be fleshed out, at least on her website, I'm not sure where I disagree, except that impressions I'm left with looking at her issues page.
Okay. I'll stop at the moment.
I think the question is more to whether are the differences between the Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians. For instance, Sarvis. I know you're not Sarvis, but Sarvis is on the ticket. Last year he ran for governor, and a week before the election, it came to find out that his voting record and his propositions are very much not what typical libertarians are, including his financing, which came from Austin, Texas. So I think a lot of people are concerned, one, is there really a difference between the three parties? You have the establishment and you have an upcoming party, the Libertarians, but also the implementation. I mean, you have a lot of great ideas, but how are you going to implement a lot of these things? I mean, more or less, if you get elected, you're probably going to alienate a lot of the people you need to talk to and then be kicked out of committees. So I think there's a lot of concern with that, the practical sense that we like to hear.
Well, first of all, I'd like to speak to Rob Sarvis. First of all, I do not know, I'm not aware that the gentleman you refer to from Austin, Texas, I don't know that he gave to Rob's campaign at all. I don't know whether he did or did not, okay? He gave to an organization called Libertarian Booster Pack. It is what went on there, this is my understanding of what went on, that due to campaign finance limit, he is married, this gentleman is married, he is wealthy, he developed a software company, I developed something, I once met the gentleman, and there was something called a configurator, which I'm really not sure what it is, but it has to do with changing colors on the internet, I think, or something like that. I'm totally muffing that description of what it is. But anyway, he developed and has become wealthy from a software company. Due to campaign limited, it's my understanding that he's a libertarian and his wife is a Democrat. But due to campaign finance rules and limitations, they give to each other's causes. So he gives, because of her, gives to some Democratic causes, and she gives to libertarian causes. And this has been grasped and made it seem as if by certain people on the right, this has been used to say, aha, this libertarian has been put up by the Democrats. No, that was not the case. Rob Sarvis, I'm not sure what you mean by Rob's positions not being, I believe you sort of stated or inferred that Rob's positions weren't libertarian. I'm not sure what positions, what positions was Rob not
not
libertarian?
to dig up, I mean, I don't have the facts in front of me, anyone can go and look it up. It was brought out, but actually it was not the far right, it was actually other libertarians that were quite upset that this happened. And then word spread slowly. But the thing is, even giving specifics, it doesn't really matter. The issue is, it's giving the atmosphere and the feeling that there isn't much difference. And that it's the libertarian candidates are really just there to throw elections. Even if they are really intending to do something well, because of the lack of votes, maybe double digits, 10, 11, 12%, it's just not enough to be the 30, 40, 50 plus needed to get a seat. So it really begs the question, what are the libertarian candidates doing?
What
Or
the libertarian candidates are trying to present an alternative
Okay.
to and I mean a substantive. I mean, you can't say that what I just said is something you'd hear coming out of Barbara Comstock's mouth or John Faust's mouth.
No.
Not even close. So I think there is a substantive difference, and I spoke to that. I mean, yeah. I mean, if people say, "Oh, you're running to be a spoiler," no, I'm not running to be a spoiler. I want there to be libertarian public policies. I'm a person who, like I said, I'm 56 years old. When I was 26, I gave up. I gave up on the Republican and Democratic parties. And while election night is my least favorite night of the year, being a libertarian, I will tell you that I do not regret being a part of the Libertarian Party, because I want there to be political change that I just don't think is going to come from either the Republicans or the Democrats, and I also want to change the election system in this nation because of the problems I just described. 45, people walking back into the General Assembly, or 63%, or we've had years in the not distant past where every incumbent in Virginia won re-election to the U.S. House of Representatives by a landslide, which is 20 percentage points or more. There have been years where everybody won re-election by 20 percentage points or more to the U.S. House of Representatives. And we need a more competitive democracy where there are more ideas floated out there instead of situations where we have candidates both running for the center, which they more or less are, not totally, more or less are, the R's and D's, and trying to limit their comments and offend as few people as possible so they can win these single-member district elections.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, can I follow on that? You're the chair of the Libertarian Party across all of Virginia.
Virginia.
Yeah. And I think you're doing a great job. We talked earlier about. I think it's great that the Libertarian Party has worked really hard to make a strong attempt to get on the ballot across many, almost all the congressional districts. I know you fell short in a few of them this year, but you tried. You tried to get in all 11, and I think that's great. Can you talk a little bit about two things? What the Libertarian Party is doing on the local level, because you talked about the General Assembly, both the House and the Senate, and you know, everybody running opposed. We got the same thing here in Frederick County and Winchester City. Everybody runs unopposed, you know, and 2015 is going to be a big year. You know, all of our constitutional officers are going to be up for re-election, and if it's the same as it's always been, they're all going to run unopposed, and you won't have a choice when you walk into the ballot, and that's a real shame. And part of, I know this is a long question.
That's all right.
But part of that is, why aren't you doing better with the Tea Parties? Why, you know, the Tea Party movement came, you know, kind of jumped out there in 2010, and it's kind of surprising to me that more of the Tea Parties aren't jumping on board with the Libertarian Party. So
Well,
unopposed elections at the local level, and Tea Parties and Libertarian Party.
It's difficult to recruit people into a minor party. Let me put it this way: it's my perception, and I don't like saying this, but the Libertarian Party is making an impact nationally. You know, it's the biggest third party in the United States by far, but as they say, that and $10 gets you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. And the thing is that our support is my perception, our support is widening, but it's not deepening. The paid membership of the Libertarian Party, this may come as a shock, but paid membership of the Libertarian Party, the National Party, is defined, and basically you sign an oath saying that I do not believe in the initiation of force to affect social ends, and donate at least $25 a year. Now I'm a life member because of what I've given. Even if I never gave another penny, I'd be a Libertarian Party member, National Party member for the rest of my life. Our national membership right now is about 14,000 people across the nation. That's it. We are, I run across people who say, oh, it's your time, you're going to start winning elections, ... And I don't like throwing cold water on them, but we will probably, I do think the Libertarian Party will come out of the 2014 election with our best ballot access ever across the nation in terms of where we have to petition then to fill in the gaps for 2016. So that's progress. But we have no member, there's never been a Libertarian Party member elected to Congress. There's never been, or in state legislatures. In fact, there's only one instance, I'll get to your question in a moment.
Yeah.
There's only one instance where a Libertarian Party member has been elected to a state legislative seat in a single member district without fusion. Okay, fusion where you can run on multiple party lines. We had some people in New Hampshire at one point who elected to the New Hampshire House, which is the largest state house in the United States of 400 members. But they were all fusion candidates, Republican and Libertarian. One guy was even Democrat and Libertarian, if you can believe that. But where I'm going with this, believe it or not, is saying that it's just difficult to get people involved and interested. I mean, local politics, it's tedious. I've got to admit. I mean, I've been to local political meetings, and you can't help but it's very. First of all, you got to study it. I mean, it's not in the popular press what's going on locally. Now, Leesburg Today does an excellent job, and probably Loudoun Times-Mirror as well. Although I frankly, I look at Leesburg Today more. They do an excellent job on the local stuff. Okay, but the thing is, it's detailed. It's tedious. Gosh, I could be home watching that college basketball game, right?
Football game.
Instead it's a winter night and I'm at Loudoun County Board of Supervisors meeting. So it's a manifestation of difficult recruiting people into the process and getting them to upgrade, so to speak, their activism. Now the other question was. And by the way, obviously Republicans and Democrats have problems doing it too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like they're filling out the ballot either.
I agree.
It's even difficult for them to do it. It's many times harder for the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
And I'm
And
sorry, I'm
the
having
second part was, how are,
Oh, the Tea Party.
the Tea Party, yeah.
I gotta tell you, this is the warmest reception I've ever received at a Tea Party.
Well, all
And
right.
I thank you for that immensely.
You ain't done yet.
I know, I should have kept my mouth shut. But
You haven't let me speak yet.
okay, all right, welcome, you're welcome to speak. But I will tell you that I've been to a lot of Tea Parties, and it's my understanding there, first of all, there are 3 different Tea Party organizations. It's my national Tea Party organizations. And having been to a lot of Tea Party events in 2010, when I ran against Frank Wolf, and fewer this year, but of course we're not done with the election cycle this year, 61 days until election day. I actually see that I've seen more Tea Party organizations be more concerned about social conservative positions than economic positions. Even though there were people sort of higher up in the national Tea Party movement who asserted the Tea Party's about economic issues. That's what we're about, ... It's like the old Groucho Marx line, who do you believe, me or your own eyes? And my own eyes, particularly in 2010, showed me that most of the Tea Party groups that I went and spoke to were more concerned about social issues than economic issues. That's my personal perception. And so therefore, they wouldn't be a fit with the Libertarian Party as much as would be the case if the issues were economically focused. But again, that's just my observation.
No, good point, thanks, Bill.
Okay. Sir, would you like to
More,
be
yeah, come on,
recognized?
man.
Want me to go first?
You set it up.
I'm going to be kind. My wife would shoot me if I was too unkind. But I'm not a spring chicken anymore. And I've watched the history of third-party attempts since I was a kid. And none of them have worked. And in most cases, they've created a situation where we got a worse result than if they hadn't gotten in. And so I have a real problem, particularly with libertarian people. Here in Virginia, they kept Ken Cuccinelli out of the office, and we got Terry McAuliffe as a result. And this has happened over and over and over again. And I know you're sincere, you've identified a lot of things that I agree with you are not right. But I don't think we're going to correct them by standing up there giving me a litany of all this stuff and then causing John Faust to win that election rather than Barbara Comstock.
I have several comments to that. One, politicians do not own people's votes.
No, I never said you did.
Politicians do not own people's votes, and people know what the rules are. People know what the rules are. And whether people were pulling the pollsters' legs or not, the exit polls showed, I'm just repeating the facts, exit polls showed that Sarvis took more votes from McAuliffe than he did Cuccinelli. Now, I don't know whether that's right or wrong. It could be those people were all lying through their teeth when they said that if it hadn't been for Sarvis, I would have voted for McAuliffe. I don't think, we just don't know. I mean, it's like, since 2000, people have been saying Ralph Nader flipped the presidential election from Al Gore to George W. Bush. Not even Al Gore agrees with that. Not even Al Gore agrees with that.
Al
say,
doesn't know whether the weather's coming or going.
well, but I'll tell you this much. I mean, believe it or not, in case you didn't know this, write-in voting, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that write-in voting is not a constitutional right. There are at least 4 states, Oklahoma is one of them, I want to say Hawaii, and I believe there are 2 others, that ban write-in voting. You're not allowed. In Oklahoma, would you really want a situation like in Oklahoma where now for the last, I guess, 2004, 2008, and 2012, the last 3 presidential elections in Oklahoma, you had 3 choices for president. Vote Republican, vote Democratic, or don't vote, because you couldn't write in. That's it. And I don't think that's enough choice. People want more choices. At least I recognize the potential problem. And I know there's strategic voting going on out there. Believe me, I had plenty of people come up to me It was very nice to hear on election day. Even my boss voted for Frank Wolf 4 years ago. He told me, he says, Bill, you did a great, I didn't see you, but somebody saw you and they were really impressed. I had people come up to me with Frank Wolf buttons on and say, I was impressed with you, I agree with so much of what you say, but I voted for you. I voted for Frank Wolf. My boss told me, Bill, I gotta tell you, I voted for Frank Wolf. And I said, why? And he says, had to keep the Democrat out. People know the rules. And they know that there was tremendous ambivalence here. Rob Sarvis chose his opponents well last year because there were a lot of people who didn't like, or just a lot of people who did not like Puccinelli-Wormicall. And that, even though Rob Sarvis put a lot of his own money, he paid his way onto the ballot. We don't. It's a big job to gather 10,000 volunteer signatures. He paid out of his own pocket the paid signatures to get on the ballot. I did the same thing when I was a Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate. I paid 23 grand out of my own pocket to get on the ballot for U.S. Senate in 2008. I gathered over 1,000 signatures myself. I had other people doing volunteer signatures, but
What was the net result of that?
What was the net result of that? I was on the ballot for U.S. Senate. I got under 1% of the vote, but it was a first step for the Libertarian Party. It was a first step for the Libertarian Party because we had never had a U.S. Senate candidate in Virginia at all before 2008. So it was a first step. And
what's the net result? Absolutely nothing.
No, I don't agree. No, sir. I don't agree at all. There's nothing wrong. It's. Let me tell you something. The word libertarian is so much better known today than it was just a few years ago. People know the word libertarian now to a much greater extent. I've seen it. I gathered signatures this year from people, and a lot of people are completely fed up with the Republicans and Democrats. A lot of people will hold their nose and vote for the lesser of two evils. I've spoken to that issue. Instant runoff voting is already used in about a dozen cities. It's already used in about a dozen cities in the United States. They use it on military ballots. Instant runoff voting with a number of southern states, Alabama, South Carolina, a couple other states, already use instant runoff voting on military and overseas ballots. In case they have to run a runoff, they wouldn't have time to get the ballots overseas again. So I understand your point, and I admit there's a lot of strategic voting going on. I'm trying to bring up solutions to these problems that you address. But I will also say that it's not, instant runoff voting is not going to make the Libertarian Party or any other third party electable on a widespread basis. I think it will take some form of proportional representation in our legislatures. I would strongly prefer a multi-party system to the system we've got here, where we're basically stuck with the R's and D's indefinitely into the future.
Can I make one other comment?
Sure.
You made a big point about the fact that there are many times when the incumbents are elected by landslides, 20% or more. With the idea, at least what I sensed was you were saying that's a bad thing. To me, that may be a good thing, that the people in the district see that they're doing a good job and are glad to put them back. I mean, we can't assume that every incumbent is a bad person.
Oh, I'm not assuming that every incumbent is a bad person, but you've got a situation in this nation now where people have a very low opinion of Congress. The Congress stinks. Those guys, they ought to throw them all out. Congress has a 12 or 6% approval rating, but my guy's okay. People don't seem to sense the disconnect there. And also, a lot of it is just name recognition. Let's face it, a lot of people really aren't that tuned into politics. They recognize one name, they don't recognize the other, they're gonna vote for the name they recognize. And I just think that, I think we'd be better off with multi-candidate districts and to have several candidates from each party run in each election. I'd like to see Barbara Comstock with other Republicans seeking a seat, and the ditto with John Faust. And it'd be a much more interesting election. You'd have much greater choice.
Well, we had a primary here, and we had a Republican primary here in the 10th district. What did we have, 8 candidates?
You had six candidates.
Six.
You had 6 candidates, yes.
Yeah.
You had, no, I'm not
Marshall won.
talking about prime, I'm not,
Marshall won,
I,
Frederick County.
I,
Yeah, he won fair county.
I understand, but there's no reason why you couldn't have candidates from the same parties running against each other in a general election. In a general election in a multi-member district. Yes,
I have
or even
a-
in a single-member district for that matter, but go
I
ahead.
have two things, a statement and a question. My statement was, I do agree, I think probably we all do on here, that in my lifetime, I mean, I'm not that old, I guess, but in my lifetime, I don't think I've ever heard a time right now where so many people everywhere are like fed up with both parties. I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, every coworker, almost every family member, friend, everywhere I go, everyone's like, the R's and D's are the same. I'm so sick of the R's and D's. There's no difference. I do agree that right now the movement for Libertarian Party is, I think, better than it's ever been. I've heard more people talking about it everywhere. So that was a comment I had. But as far as the question, I'm gonna bring up a question, and I've read about in the paper what happened at the other Tea Party locally, and I don't want to. That's not where I'm trying to go with this. But I do have a question, and it's not that I do agree that most of us, I think, economics is our priority, but I do have a social question. Because everything you said economically, I totally like and agree with. I think it all makes perfect sense. Socially, though, my one issue is on immigration. And I read in the paper that the last Tea Party that, maybe I misinterpreted, but it sounded like what they said in the paper, that you were totally open borders, let them all in, but tonight, it sounds like it's
No,
not.
I said the same thing then.
Right, it sounds like it's not quite open borders. What you sounded like almost sounded like what we used to have, where you're for them coming in if they get a background check, if they get a physical, make sure they're not a disease, make sure they can support themselves, no welfare.
That's what I said there.
So could you go in a little bit more, without too much social issues, could you go in a little bit more? Because in Virginia, that did almost affected us a couple months ago when they tried shipping all them immigrants into Lawrenceville, Virginia, and the town revolted, said absolutely not, no way. And now we find out they're shipping them all over the country and they're not telling us where. So they could be shipping them here. But what is more in depth on immigration? We'll put this a little bit into that.
Okay, I'm not sure. First of all, I said the same thing to the best of my knowledge. I don't know, I mean, I said, I do think it should be open but regulated. You know, if you do have a system whereby people can come into the nation, assuming background check, if somebody tries to sneak in, well, there'd be reason to suspect, hey, what's going on here with this person? Okay, but beyond that, I'm not quite sure how to address your. I'm not quite sure what you're driving at.
Well, like if when they come across the border, it sounds like you'd be for them saying, okay, all these people that come across, we're going to give them a physical, we're going to check their backgrounds, we're going to fingerprint them, whatever. We're going to. It's not just let them all in. It's like you're not for sneaking across. It sounds like you're going to let them in, test them, whatever.
I think I want to bring the people up above ground. I don't think anybody benefits from an underground economy.
Right.
I don't think we do. I don't think people who are already
So,
here do.
I guess a more specific way to ask it was if they tried shipping some in here and said, hey, we're going to bring in 1,000 people somewhere in Virginia, and they said before we bring them in, I want them tested for diseases, I want their background checks run, and if all that comes back good, then you let them in. Is that much like what you're
Yes,
saying?
that is what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Again,
Okay.
not a serious communicable disease, no criminal background, not reasonably deemed a security threat.
Okay.
But Bill
Yes, sir.
back here hadn't had a chance yet.
I had a similar question. I was waiting until it kind of quieted down. On the immigration thing, my question was going to be, you know, I think there has to be some limitations on number of people coming in. And I was going to ask how your policy, because you did kind of gloss over, just kind of give highlights or whatever, how do you differ from what we have in place right now?
Oh, I'll tell you.
And you don't have to go.
What we have in place right now, this is not necessarily current, but it's current enough. This is our current immigration system. I'll hold it right side up. I mean, I know that. I mean, this is our current immigration system in sort of a schematic. I don't know if that's the right word, diagram. But it's incredibly. I will tell you. You know,
It looks like
right
the
across
bottom
the top here. I mean, well, I'll just tell you this. First of all, I think everybody assumes that there is a line out there. Okay? There's not a line for a Mexican who doesn't have skills, who has no family in the United States. There is no line. it is impossible for that person to legally immigrate to the United States. I've been told by an immigration expert, people in the Philippines who have family connections in the United States, it's a 25-year wait. It's a 25-year wait. I know personally a young woman, a very hard-working young woman from France, who does not care for her countrymen because she thinks they're lazy. And she doesn't care for 75% tax rates or whatever the tax rate is. And she wanted to come here, and she is here now. She finally got a green card, but what she had to go through, I believe she has a green card, but in any event, I mean, what she had to go through, including slow bureaucracy in processing something where she had to go back to France, and she was thinking about staying illegally in the United States. Who said, no, don't do that, go back to France. She went back to France, was back there about 3 months or so, then it got processed, she's okay, she comes back. There are diversity visas. There are people who are discriminated against to immigrate to the United States simply because they come from a country where a lot of immigrants come from already. It's easier to immigrate to the United States from a nation from which few people come to the United States up to this point. So no, I don't propose numeric limitations on immigration. And I think that, and in part, I do not propose numeric limitations, either overall or by country, on the immigration. I think that we ought to have a standard, which I just articulated, and if people can bring themselves here and support themselves or have families support them, they ought to be able to come to the United States and have a reasonable path to citizenship. But that's not what's really important. What's really important is that they have a job visa and not be a part of the underground economy. Have them be a part of the above ground economy, have them pay taxes, have them have at least protections that you know, where they can't be harmed by other people or taken advantage of, or be victims of human trafficking, something like that.
And you said no welfare.
And I said no welfare. Yes, Rand.
So Bill, it's kind of conflicting. You said open but regulated,
Yes.
and that's kind of like spitting hot and cold out at the same time.
No.
Either it's well, let me make my point. Either you're open or you're we have a regulated system right now. Howbeit it's probably not very good, and it's not working, and it needs to be. It probably needs to be overhauled. But either you're regulated or you're not.
No, I think that look.